Scott Morrison left politics this week with a speech in Parliament that was as daggy as you'd expect. Scomo accepting a challenge from his daughters to work in the title of every Taylor Swift album. I apologise for this clip in advance, but it'll be over in a minute.
It is true that my political opponents have often made me see red. Often when subjected to the tortured poets who would rise to attack my reputation. In response, I always thought it important to be fearless and speak now, or forever hold my silence and allow those attacks to become folklore. Ever since leaving university in 1989, this has always been my approach. My great consolation has always been my lover, Jen, who has always been there for me whenever I needed her from dawn and beyond the many midnights we have shared together. See, I'm actually a true numismatic, after all. And I can assure you there is no bad blood, as I've always been someone who's been able to shake it off.
Oh God, thank you for bearing with us for that one. I don't know why feminists don't like him. He's always done a great job of amplifying the daggy dad myth that permeates Australian culture. They should be giving him a medal instead. Anyway, that wasn't the worst of it. The worst of it was when he tried to justify his government's cowardly mishandling of COVID. You know, the part where he absolved himself of leadership responsibility by setting up the National Cabinet and deferring to the state premiers, who in turn tried to absolve themselves of leadership responsibility by deferring to their chief health officers and ignoring all other advice and warnings. Or the bit where he wouldn't let Australian citizens return home, even those whose lives were at risk stuck in India, rendering the Aussie passport a useless piece of paper. Or the bit where he allowed the premiers to run roughshod over our constitution and close borders, impose ridiculous fines, fire rubber bullets at protesters, use the police as political weapons, force people to inject an unproven, questionably effective vaccine or lose their jobs. Yeah, he seemed to just, I don't know, forget all that stuff, as politicians do when they reflect on their time in power. And he spoke only of his achievements, some of which are notable, some of which are a little inflated and questionable in my opinion, but you judge for yourselves. We'll just let him have the last word here. I guess he's earned that right.
Having saved for a rainy day, it was now raining. It was pouring, and we had to respond. Australia would emerge with one of the lowest fatality rates from COVID in the developed world. When compared to the average fertility rates of the OECD countries, Australia's response saved more than 30,000 lives. We were described as the gold standard of COVID responses by Bill Gates at the Munich Security Conference, and the second most COVID-prepared nation by the Johns Hopkins Institute. This will always be to Greg Hunt's great credit, and all those he worked with, his eternal credit. It is also true that during the pandemic, the rate of death by suicide actually fell and remained down in 2021. This was nothing short of an answer to prayer and the extraordinary efforts of our mental health workers, professionals and services. And I particularly want to acknowledge Professor Pat McGorry and Christine Morgan, who were incredible supports to me during that time. But our plan was not just about saving lives, but to save livelihoods as well. And this was achieved with Australia emerging with one of the strongest economies through COVID. Our historic economic response kept 700,000 businesses in business. It kept more than 1 million Australians in work. And despite these unpredicted outlays, Australia was one of just 9 countries to retain our AAA credit rating. Our response was timely, it was targeted, and it was temporary. And we responsibly retired measures as soon as it was prudent to do so, leading to an historic reduction in the actual budget deficit, with the budget even moving into structural surplus during COVID. And as Joss asked me to remind everyone this morning, an unemployment rate with a 3 in front of it when we left.